Number 1. Hating small talk. Most people can do it. Weather, weekend plans. How are you? Fine. Good. Can't complain. You open your mouth and nothing comes out. Or the wrong thing comes out. Something real. Something too specific or too honest or too far past the surface for where this conversation is supposed to be. You walk away from small talk feeling more alone than before it started. Like you just spent 10 minutes performing a version of connection without any of the actual thing. That's not social failure. That's a calibrated brain refusing to settle for less than what conversation is actually for. Researchers at the University of Arizona tracked the daily conversations of hundreds of people, recording what they actually talked about, how often, and how substantive those conversations were. They found a clear pattern. The more meaningful the conversation, the higher the person's sense of life satisfaction. The people who felt most fulfilled weren't the ones making the most small talk. They were the ones skipping it. Your brain already knew this. It just didn't have the study to prove it. Small talk isn't harmless filler. For a mind wired for depth, it's actively draining, the equivalent of running a program that produces nothing. You're spending energy performing a social ritual that gives you back almost no information, no connection, and no meaning. You don't hate people. You hate wasting the interaction on nothing when there's so much more available. That's not a social flaw. That's a standard most people never think to set. Number 2, asking too many questions. You ask why. Then you ask why that. Then you ask what that means and how it works and whether anyone has actually checked if it's true. People get tired. You can see it. The conversation moves on and you're still back 3 steps, trying to understand the thing everyone else just accepted and forgot. You've been told that you overthink, that sometimes you just need to let things go. But here's the thing. You can't let it go. Not because something is wrong with you, because your brain treats an unanswered question the same way a hungry person treats an empty plate. It won't stop noticing until the hunger is satisfied. Researchers at the University of Edinburgh analyzed decades of studies on what actually predicts intelligence and high performance. They found 3 factors: raw cognitive ability, effort, and intellectual curiosity. Not 2, 3. And the combined effect of curiosity and effort on performance nearly matched the effect of intelligence alone. They called it the hungry mind. You have one. That's not a problem to manage. It's the mechanism driving everything you're capable of. The people who accepted the answer and moved on, they got to feel comfortable in that conversation. You got to actually understand something. And then another thing. And then another thing. The questions that exhaust other people are the same ones that have been building your mind your entire life, one gap filled at a time. You were never too much. You were just operating at a depth most people don't reach. Number 3, talking to yourself out loud. You do it in the kitchen, in the car, while you're trying to solve something, while you're walking through a problem that won't sit still in your head. You mutter, you narrate. Sometimes you argue with yourself. Sometimes you explain things out loud to no one. People have caught you. Some of them laughed. You've been called odd, a little unhinged. But here's what they don't know. When you talk to yourself, your brain works better. Researchers measured what actually happens in the brain during self-talk using fMRI scans. They found that self-talk directly alters the connectivity of the brain in ways that improve performance, measurably, visibly, on a brain scan. Thinking out loud isn't a quirk. It's an active process that upgrades how your mind handles problems in real time. Language is one of the most powerful tools the brain has. When you externalize a thought, say it out loud instead of just holding it, you force it into a structure. You have to organize it. You have to make it coherent enough to say. And the moment you hear it back, you process it a second time through a different channel. You're not just thinking, you're editing. The people who stay silent don't hold a more sophisticated thought in their head. They just never built the habit of pressure testing ideas through their own voice. Talking to yourself isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign your mind is working hard enough to need the extra processing power. Number 4, changing your mind mid-conversation. You're mid-sentence, someone says something and you stop. Not because you're confused, because what they just said is actually right, and you know it, and you'd rather be correct than win. So you say it out loud. Actually, that's a good point. I think I was wrong. And the room gets weird. People don't know what to do with that. In most social environments, changing your mind looks like weakness, like you didn't know what you were talking about. like you lost. That isn't weakness. It's one of the rarest cognitive abilities a person can have. Researchers at the University of Cambridge studied the psychological roots of intellectual humility, the ability to recognize your own fallibility and revise your beliefs when evidence demands it. They found that two things predicted it most strongly: cognitive flexibility and intelligence. The intellectually humble person doesn't discard new information to protect a prior belief. They do something much harder. They update. Most people can't do this, not because they lack the information, because their brain treats being wrong as a threat and defends against it the way it would defend against anything dangerous. Their identity is wrapped up in their position. Changing it feels like losing a piece of themselves. Your brain doesn't work that way. For you, the position was never the point. The truth was. That's not indecision. That's not being a pushover. That's a mind that cares more about accuracy than approval. And that is a rare thing to find in a room full of people all quietly protecting what they already think. The people who never change their minds don't have stronger convictions than you. They just have more to lose by admitting they were wrong. You don't. And that's the difference. Number 5, needing to be alone a lot. You cancel plans and feel relief, not guilt. You need a full day to yourself after a social week. Not because something went wrong, because something went right, and now your mind needs time to process it, reset, and come back to itself. Others have called you antisocial. And there's a version of you that spent years thinking that was a character flaw, that you were too closed off, that something about the way you're wired made you less capable of connection than everyone around you. It isn't a flaw, it's a function. Research from the University of Rochester found that when people choose solitude for its actual value, for creativity, self-reflection, and emotional regulation, time alone consistently produces measurable psychological benefits. Not because isolation is good for you, because chosen solitude is a fundamentally different state than forced loneliness. One depletes, the other builds. The key word is chosen. You don't retreat because you can't handle people. You retreat because your mind does its most important work in the space between conversations. That's where you process what you actually think. That's where ideas form properly, without an audience editing them before they're ready. That's where you return to yourself after spending hours being whoever the room needed you to be. Most people fill that space immediately. Another scroll, another message, another plan. They're not necessarily more social than you. They're less comfortable with what shows up when everything goes quiet. You're not antisocial. You're a person who takes their own inner life seriously enough to protect the conditions it needs to function. That's not a weakness. That's discipline most people mistake for distance. Number 6, taking uncomfortably long pauses before you respond. You go quiet before you answer. Not a second, sometimes several. Long enough that people jump in to fill the silence, or assume you didn't hear them, or start to wonder if they said something wrong. You didn't miss it. You're processing it. There are 2 ways a brain can respond. The fast way, gut reaction, first thought, whatever comes up immediately. Psychologists call this type 1 thinking. It's efficient, it's automatic, and it's what most people do in conversations, most of the time. Then there's the slower way, the kind where you actually stop, check the first response, ask yourself if it's right, and sometimes replace it entirely with something better. Type 2 thinking. Deliberate, analytic, more effortful, but measurably more accurate. Researchers found that the willingness to engage this kind of analytic thinking, to override the immediate gut response, is one of the strongest predictors of reasoning quality across virtually every area of life. Better judgments, less susceptibility to misinformation, more accurate beliefs, more creative thinking. Most people skip it, not because they can't do it, because the social pressure to respond quickly is enormous. Silence feels like failure. A fast answer feels like confidence. But the pause isn't confusion. The pause is the work. When you go quiet before you speak, you're doing something most people have trained themselves out of. You're checking the first answer before you give it. You're asking whether what you're about to say is actually true. That's not slow thinking. That's careful thinking. And careful thinking, it turns out, is rare. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and click the video on screen.